evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee, being held specifically to consider a call-in request. Before I talk more about that, I need to deal with a few procedural matters. Can everyone joining via Zoom hear me? If you can, please raise your hands like so. Thank you. This evening's meeting is held at the retreat, Dockside, 1000 Dockside Road, London, E16 2QU. Councillors unable to be physically present are able to join remotely. However, they will not be able to vote and their attendance won't be officially recorded, although their virtual attendance will be noted in the minutes. I would like to welcome the members of the public and press who are either physically attending or watching on YouTube. Members of the committee, please can I ask that you indicate that you wish to speak by raising your physical hand or by using the hand up symbol on the Zoom dashboard. Can everyone physically present continue to wear their face mask until invited to speak? After you have finished speaking, please replace your mask. Please can everyone be mindful of social distancing requirements during and after the meeting? Please can you also remember to scan the location QR code for track and trace purposes. Colleagues, this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee is now called to order. A warm welcome to everyone attending the meeting and to members of the public viewing on YouTube. Also, thank you to Colleen Lee Parkway, Cabinet Member for Brighter Future, and Geeta Submaram Mooney, Corporate Director for Brighter Futures, Newham Children and Young People's Commission for joining us to present the Cabinet decision and to take questions. I will leave it to them to introduce any other officers they have to assist them later on. And I must apologize to Geeta if I have pronounced her surname wrong. Please accept my apologies. Right. The second item on our agenda is apologies for absence. Is there any apologies for absence? Yeah. So can the clerk note that Mas Patel has sent his apologies? Is there any other apologies for absence? Yes.
Daniel Lee Parkway.
Okay, Daniel Lee Parkway sends his apologies, and also Josh Garfield has sent his apologies. So there's 3 apologies for noting. Is there any other? No? Okay. Item 3, declaration of interest. Is there any interest to be declared by any member, present or online? I recognize Councillor Josh Garfield. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Owing to being a member of the board of the Theatre Royal Stratford East, both its charitable arm and its trading arm, I've taken advice from the monitoring officer, Daniel Fenwick, and will be recusing myself from this meeting and leaving the Zoom presently.
Thank you, Josh. Have a good evening. Is there any apologies for absence? No? We now move into item 4 on our agenda, and that is the substantive item for this evening's meeting. The item is dealing with the call-in request. It's titled the Stratford Youth Zone Permission Authority to Tender for Service. A Cabinet report relating to permission to tender for service relating to the Stratford Youth Centre was considered by Cabinet on the 20th of July, 2021. The Cabinet paper is included with the publication of this agenda. This cabinet decision, based on the recommendation contained in the paper, has been subsequently called in by 4 members of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, namely Councillor Alicia Chaudhry, Mas Patel, Lakshmini Shah, and Councillor Ken Clark. This is in accordance with provision of Rule 15 of the Overview and Scrutiny Procedures Rules in Part 4 of the Council's Constitution. Implementation of any cabinet decision relating to this report has been suspended whilst the call-in is considered. On 20th of July 2021, the cabinet agreed the recommendations set out in the cabinet report of 20th July 2021. Let me just remind everyone and also our viewers on YouTube of the recommendation, and I quote, "For the reasons set out in the report, Cabinet is recommended to agree the recommendation of a tender process to procure a provider to operate and manage Stratford Youth Zone for a period of 10 years, with an option to extend for 5 years at an estimated contract value of $200,000 per annum, equating circa $2 million over a 10-year contract period. The purpose of this Overview and Scrutiny Committee is to consider the call-in of this cabinet recommendation and is by definition limited to this cabinet recommendation. The following procedure is generally followed when Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider a call-in. A, presentation of the call-in by one of the call-in members, followed by question from members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. 2, response from the lead member officer, followed by question from members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. General debate and a decision by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Regarding the decision, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can either agree through a vote of those physically in attendance to either take no further action, which would have the effect of the cabinet decision standing, or to refer the matter back to the decision maker for further consideration, setting out the nature of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee concern and possible recommendation for an alternative course of action. If the matter is fed back to Cabinet, Cabinet can confirm their original decision or amend the decision. A Cabinet meeting has been arranged for tomorrow at 1 p.m., which would be cancelled if the Overview and Scrutiny Committee decision tonight is not to refer the matter back to Cabinet. In light of this, I have circulated prior to this meeting an email to all participants outlining the following processes for the consideration of the call-in, which the committee will now follow. The meeting will last for 1 hour 15 minutes. Also, as there is another, since there is another scrutiny meeting shortly after this one. There will be an initial 10 minutes presentation by councillors who have called in the decision, who has come to this meeting to explain the rationale for the call-in, also with suggestion they would wish the committee to consider if they remain unpersuaded by the executive response, and present any recommendation or recommendations they wish to be considered for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to put forward to the executive. So at this stage, I will now hand over to my colleagues who have called in this cabinet decision to make their presentation lasting no longer than 10 minutes. Can I ask who would be leading on the presentation?
The chair colleagues have agreed that I will lead.
Okay, so Councillor Ken Clark has indicated that he would lead on the presentation. Can we note that, please? Councillor Clark, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the proposed changes to Stratford Youth Zone, previously known as Stratford Circus, and to clarify with the Executive some of the information in the proposal. My colleagues and I am grateful to the Cabinet member and officers for their attendance this evening. Reason for the call. Some of the reasons why a decision can be called in include when members, one, believe it may be contrary to the normal requirements for decision making, or two, believe it may be contrary to the Council's agreed policy, framework and or budget, or three, members need further information for the decision taker to explain why it was taken. A call-in can ask questions such as, one, has the decision been well explained or do we need more information? Two, was it clear what the reasons for the decision were? Three, was it clear what the desired outcomes were? Four, was it clear what alternative options were considered? And five, was it clear why the alternative options were not chosen? And finally, six, do overview and scrutiny need any more information or clarification? This call-in will scrutinise, one, our lawful duty under public sector equality law, and two, our lawful duty to a balanced budget. As Tony mentioned earlier on, at the meeting of Cabinet on the 20th of July 2021, it was stated that the Council sought, quote, to remove barriers to success for young people. The resulting lack of discussion on the report within the public domain has left some unanswered questions that we would like to clarify. Once this clarity is received, the committee will know if a recommendation to amend the decision is required. The Equality Act 210. This is a quote from the Equality and Human Rights Commission website. Quote, when someone is planning services, they might make a decision, apply a rule or work out a way of doing things, which will affect how you assess their services. If this has a worse impact on you and other people with a particular protective characteristic than on people who do not share that characteristic, then it will be indirect discrimination unless they are able to objectively justify the decision, rule or way of doing things. It is noted that the report to Cabinet stated under the paragraph headed, quote, equalities implications, quote, that the weight given to an equality impact is a matter for Council. It is not clear from the decision taken what weight was given to the protected characteristic disability when considering the equalities impact. In order to draw out a clearer explanation of the adherence to our equalities duties, we'll be asking the Executive about what public consultation was there to inform this decision, what reasonable adjustments were made to consult Stratford Learning Disabled actors, the Blue Sky actors, about this decision. Did we comply with our lawful duty under public section equality law by making the consultation accessible to people with protected characteristics? And were the appropriate trade unions fully consulted? In order to draw out our lawful duty to a balanced budget, we'll be asking about how the 2 million over 10 years will be funded and who will fund the cost of running the youth zone until April 2022. We note the agenda asks for our recommendation to change the decision made by the Executive. Before the Executive has an opportunity to respond to these concerns, without precluding the reply of the executive, it may be that a possible amendment to the Cabinet recommendation would be, in quotes, that the tender for the Stratford Youth Zone is waiting to recognise the disadvantages of people with learning disabilities and or special additional needs, and that the tender will address these needs to give people with these protected characteristics equitable access to arts activities within the Stratford Youth Zone. I trust this presentation sets out the reasons for the calling as asked, and that the executive will be able to address these concerns. I will also have a number of questions to ask later on in the agenda, as the Chair mentioned. Would it be possible for Councillor Shah just to make a few comments about?
Yes, by all means, you're quite within your 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I must say you have about 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes left.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Clark. I want to start by sharing something very personal to me, which may be news to many members in this forum. I'm a parent whose child was stabbed in the dinner hall in a school. So I understand the importance of having youth clubs for young people and the contribution it makes to shape young people's educational outcomes and their future. Similarly, it is important for our community, our young people with SEND and adults who have learning disabilities to participate in cultural life, arts, and leisure activities. I can name many legislations that local authorities are bound by to deliver an inclusive agenda for participating in cultural life for adults and young people with SEND. Because of the time constraints, I will not elaborate, but name a few. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2017, Article 30, the Warnock Report, the Framework for SEND Code of Practice, the Salamanca Statement are a few to name. My neighbors, 2 adult children who have learning disabilities, were part of a user group who enjoyed the activities delivered at the Stratford Circus. On behalf of the children and adults who enjoyed cultural activities that took place, I would like to ask the members to recognize the rights of persons with disabilities to take part on an equal basis with others in cultural life, and shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that persons with disabilities will enjoy access to cultural materials, enjoy access to films, theatre, and other cultural activities, enjoy access to places for cultural performances, services such as theatres, music and art services in accessible formats, which will contribute to the enrichment of their personal and social lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other contributors?
Sir, I'm happy with my colleague's presentation, and I have got a number of questions once allowed to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chaudhry. Thank you, Councillor Clark, Chaudhry, and Shaw for your presentation. Can I, by way of direction from my observation, say to the committee, Councillor Clark and Shaw, in their presentation, has touched on a number of areas. However, I would like to remind the colleagues that we are here simply to consider the Cabinet recommendation to agree the commencement of a tender process. And that is the main point of why we're here this evening. Councillor Clark in his presentation mentioned some items, which is very useful, but those items should have been taken up before. So I'm just mentioning that because I don't want to use up his 20 minutes on items that is not pertaining to the offshore report. Some of the items he raised regarding the disabilities are items for a later stage when the procurement specification is drawn up and before a Cabinet decision is made. Then scrutiny can have a pre-decision scrutiny on that, because it would be for the executive to say whether they have a specification for the procurement at this stage. So can we limit our questions to Councillor Clark to the recommendation, which is on page 14, paragraph 2 of the agenda, and not to take up our time with the issues that is not pertaining to this item, to this recommendation. Okay, so can Councillor Clark and colleagues are now open to questioning. Both members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the Executive can ask Councillor Clark, Shaw and Chaudhry questions. Do I recognize any member? No.
Sorry, Chair, I'm a bit confused. Is it us asking question to the cabinet?
The committee is now allowed to ask you questions.
Committee is allowed to.
Yes, so now there's 20 minutes of questioning to you. And I just go over quickly. And you should have come prepared to explain your rationale for calling in the cabinet decision. 2, suggest how you wish the decision to be changed if you remain unpersuaded after hearing the executive response. So, but when we get to that stage, after the executive has responded, you might be persuaded by the presentation and decide not to go any further, or you might remain unpersuaded and then wish to make changes to it. And if you wish to make changes, you then would make known those potential changes to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which we would vote upon at the voting stage.
This is what I thought, Chair, was explained by Councillor Clark, the reason why the call-in and we are here today. And I was under the impression that from now on here, we can ask question to see if we can accept the recommendation or not. So probably
You will have a time for questioning.
Thank you.
When the executive do their presentation, you will have a time to question the executive. Now it's time for the call-in members to be questioned. Councillor Masters.
Hi, I'm going to ask the question just because I'm very aware that there don't seem to be any other questions. I'm just interested, you kind of suggested that there might have been earlier opportunities for my colleagues, Councillor Clark, Shah and Chaudhry, to query this decision to change the use of this particular premises. I'm just wondering whether they're aware of any other opportunity that they've had to query it, because I'm certainly not, and I'm just wondering if I've missed something maybe from your introduction.
Okay, right. It seems like please be mindful that I'm not the one here to answer questions, but I will oblige Councillor Masters. The cabinet decision, as I understand it, and as it's before us, is seeking not us. The papers sought cabinet agreement to go out to tender, okay. And that is what it is, as I understand it. However, there would have been an opportunity, I suppose, what I think Councillor Clark is alluding to, when the original service users, when the contract came to an end, and that would have been sometime which I'm sure the executive would respond to. That would have been a time when those papers would have been all in the year. But I leave that to Gita and Colin to respond to your question. But there was a time, and there would be a time in the future with this procurement. Obviously, Overview would have an interest in either procurement, or we can call in if we don't like what is being done in our name via cabinet. So there will be a time, yes. Councillor Masters.
Second question.
Is it to me or to Councillor Clark, remember it's Councillor Clark and
It's kind of a point of fact, actually. I mean, Councillor Clark's talked about this in terms of indirect discrimination. I would actually say it's direct discrimination, because what's happening is the procurement will involve this site being used purely for one group, so it will automatically be excluding different people with different protected characteristics. I mean, the difference is, for example, when they introduced...
Who's your question directed to?
It's
remember, it's questioning for Councillor Clark.
It's a question of fact to Councillor Clark, whether he accepts that actually it's direct discrimination and not indirect discrimination, because indirect discrimination is when you have an unwanted consequence. Like, for example, when they brought in 24-hour news, the numbers of women employed in television dropped, which, you know, was never the intention, but it's what the impact was. Here, we're talking about procurement that will deliberately limit the use of the site to young people, and therefore excluding older people, older disabled people, older people with other characteristics.
So you're making a statement, you're not asking a question.
I'm asking, there is a question this. I'm just asking Councillor Clark whether he would accept that we're talking about direct discrimination rather than indirect discrimination.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I mean, I think there is a case to say that, but what I've been trying to do in my presentation is have a somewhat open mind, because I'm really trying to search for information, because you're quite right, it could well be direct. Yeah, I've tried to phrase it in a way that I can't say exactly what that is at the moment until we hear the contribution from the Cabinet member and her officers. So, but yes, there is a case for that, and that might well come out in the general questioning and in their presentation, Chair. Okay.
Any other question? I'm looking on the screen for those who are viewing remotely. Is there any question? Those remote and those present? I recognize Councillor Wilson.
So just to be clear, Chair, I made notes of what was being presented by the call-in sponsors, and it seemed to revolve around Councillor Clark's introduction was contrary to a consideration that we could use about the consideration of alternative options. So I'll come back to that one, just to clarify where I'm going with this and put to the people who are presenting their case. It's about contrary to the normal constitutional position on alternative options for this site. Secondly, and Councillor Masters has already touched on it, so I don't want to consider at the moment the Equalities Act and the Disability and the Protected Characteristics one, but just to note that that was another one. I'm just clarifying from the call-in people what their main issues, the alternative options, the equalities perspective, and there was a reference to funding as well, how the funding, and I think they were the three. I was just checking with Councillor Clark or Councillor Shah or Councillor Chowdhury, were they the three main considerations before I go on to my supplementary, if I may, Chair? So it's directed to the call-in supporters.
Who's going to take that?
I take it.
Okay, Councillor Clark will respond.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, as you can see, we're somewhat in the dark. I've read the Cabinet notes, and I did listen to the Cabinet meeting that particular day. When I was working, I managed to sort of do two things at once. And there was only one question that was raised, and that wasn't by a Cabinet member, which wasn't that searching a question. And I started to wonder what discussions had taken place regarding the subjects that you've just been regarding, whether the funding, for example. I saw in the report there was an element of where the funding was coming from, but it didn't really go much deeper, and it certainly didn't go into what the temporary situation is. And as you can see, earlier on, I did put up a possible amendment, which was regarding, again, that the tender for Stratford Zone is weighted to recognise the disadvantages of people with learning disabilities. So yeah, that's one of the key points that we're discussing, because obviously the decision that has been made about Stratford Circus and what its next, what it's going to end up being. But what we're trying to find out is what the detail of that is, and also making sure that people with disabilities are really being catered for, and we don't have discrimination. And I think that's part of the tender. The tender is important, that you weight things in that tender. And that's what I think we're hopefully, as we get through the actual presentation by the officers and by the cabinet member, we'll find out more information, because this certainly didn't happen at the cabinet meeting.
So this is why I'm asking. I'm asking for clarity, Chair. We are under a relatively narrow piece of legislation here. We are calling in, or have the right to call in, a decision about the tender process. Is that your understanding? And these other issues, is it that your contention, Councillor Clark, need to be the result of a discussion here before we make our mind up about how we frame that call in? You're seeking further. Sorry, Ken. That you're seeking further clarifications on those points that you've already outlined. I was just trying to make it very clear where you were coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I sort of went through the reason for the call-in earlier on.
Yeah.
Sort of outline where we're coming from on this. But we're not opposing what's going on in Stratford Circus and the change that's being made. But what we are looking at and want to know further details is about those items that I flagged up in the original presentation. And hopefully today we will get answers to those questions. Or if not, then basically, we've got, because I was asked to do an amendment and I've done an amendment. Again, that's the discussion after I think we've heard contribution from the administration.
Yep,
but thank you for your question.
Thank you. Avinder.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Ken, from what I can obviously understand is that obviously fundamentally we feel that the tender process might not have the detail of making sure that the disabled children or persons are included within the process. The funding, how obviously, I know we've got some papers telling us how the funding is going to come along, but fundamentally it's the issue of the lack of clarity and the detail, and possibly the lack of consultation within the cabinet itself that took place. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I did say that in the presentation about what appears to be, and maybe we find out later on, what the amount of consultation was. How much consultation took place, who did it take with. I also put in there about trade unions and people, obviously in that category, the characteristics that we've been talking about today. So I keep repeating this. We're not here. We know we can't stop what's happening. In fact, we're not trying to, but we're trying to make sure that what does happen next is a number of certain categories will be taken care of and they will be looked after in a proper manner.
If I can just add one other sentence, which is like, we want to make sure that there are improvements and improvement for the users groups. And as long as we are satisfied, then it's fine. So this is, we thought that it is an opportunity for us to find more information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark, you said consultation. Can you elaborate? Consultation with whom and when and what about? Can you elaborate on the consultation?
My question is, Chair, is what consultation was there?
In respect of?
In respect of this particular process, which was the going to tender of how the place was going to operate in future. Okay. I think that's what people, because obviously there will be people, users of Stratford Circus, who might well find themselves displaced. I don't know. So that's why I'm asking these questions. That's why it is a searching process of finding out what is the detail, because at the moment, not much of the detail seems to have come out in my little world about what's been going on. As
I understand it, it's going to be used primarily by the youths of the Miram, so it's a youth zone. And as such, it's for the executive to answer.
I'm just going to say, with the greatest respect, Tony, I think you should.
Yeah, it's for the executive to answer
Let them answer the question.
that question. Yeah. Any other? Yes.
Mr. Chair, this question is for Ken Clark. The building is currently a use zone. The decision has already been taken about the use of the building. Do you know for certain that the groups that were in there can't use the building alongside the use zone?
Chair.
Asking.
Yes, you may.
Yeah, well, that's another question we don't know.
Yeah, that's all.
And this is why we're sitting here today. We don't know that. Is it purely going to be for people under the age of 25? Or is it going to have a wider remit? Is it going to allow other people to use the facility who might have been using it before? So you're quite right to ask the question, but again, that's what we're trying to find out, exactly how this new use zone is going to operate. And I keep repeating myself, I'm not sitting here against the use zone, not at all. I just want to know how it's been rerun. And obviously, there's always been a great element in that building of the arts, and how much of that is going to be contained, and also people with various characteristics, disabilities, etc., how they're going to be catered for. So it's a searching process, and that's why we're sitting here today. I think we would have been irresponsible not to have asked more questions about what has been happening and what these things, they could be great ideas.
Okay, can we round up, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ken. Councillor Nazir. And can I ask, can everyone online hear what's being said by all the participants present physically? You can.
Yeah. Okay,
thank you. Councillor Nazir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for calling the decision in. I feel a little bit compromised asking this question because I feel that I would have preferred to have heard from the cabinet member and then go back to colleagues who are calling in. So it feels a bit back to front. So apologies for if it just sounds back to front. I guess one of the things that I'm struggling to understand is quite what the call in at this point is seeking to achieve, because it's almost like if I've understood correctly, it's almost like at the point where the council reclaimed the tenancy, that might have been a place to challenge that decision. Even, you know, was that the right decision, or indeed the terms of reference for the tender itself and a sort of pre-decision scrutiny on those who are applying for that tender, proposing to that tender. But this seems like a odd time. Is it a case of you want to interrogate the terms of the tender, or is it is that because it seems like the horse has either bolted or the horse hasn't yet arrived? So I just want to understand what it is we're getting to here. Is it the terms of the tender, or I'll stop there because I think I'm not entirely clear, and it would be great to get that clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ken.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor, as I said just now, the situation regarding the change of use to a use zone happened some time ago, and I'm not aware anybody challenged that at the time. But what we now look to do is try to have some influence over what the terms of the tenure will be, and who we can safeguard within that tenure that can still play a role and be able to use the new centre. I understand now that the centre is going to have an arts aspect, which I welcome as well. But I'd like to know more about that, what will actually be. And obviously we seem to have a situation as well, is that in the short term, Pioneer, according to the document, will be looking after the premises till, I think it's April 2022. And then obviously I take it then that whoever wins the contract will then take over. But there are questions again that we can hopefully tease out during the course of this discussion.
Thank you. If there's no other question, I would bring this session to a close and invite the executive to make their 10 minutes presentation. Yeah.
So, sorry, can I have a supplementary?
Yes, briefly.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be long. So I just want to, perhaps this is just to, I'm not quite sure who this is to anymore, but just trying to understand that. Is it a case technically that, as I understood it, it was simply a decision to create a tender process rather than the point at which the terms are being outlined? That's what I understood. Is that incorrect? And maybe this is actually to the cabinet member, because I guess I'm just a bit confused on the timing, because all I can see is a decision to tender rather than the specifics of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we will reserve that question for the executive. And hopefully they might cover it in their presentation. Thank you, everyone who have partaken so far. I'm now handing over to the executive. Peter and Colleen, it's your turn. Who's going to be presenting?
I will be, Chair.
Okay, Colleen Lee, Parkway Councillor, is going to do the first part of the presentation. Your time starts now, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarity, I will be making my presentations and along, so will Geetha. I did find it difficult to hear Ken as his back's towards us. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to offer the rationale for the report leading to the Cabinet's decision, and for the passion of our members who are such great advocates for our residents and more particularly our young people. The purpose of this report is to ensure we follow Council standing orders whereby, due to the value of the contract, Cabinet approval is required to allow officers to commence a procurement process. The first priority in the corporate plan is to support children and young people's aspirations, keep them safe and remove barriers to success. We are specifically committed to developing a high quality co-produced youth offer that provides a varied and inclusive range of social and emotional learning activities for young people between the ages of 9 to 19 up to 25 with special educational needs and disabilities. Our theory of change underpins our youth work programme to ensure that young people have agencies and that we deliver services which make Newham a place where we are all valued members of our community, have influence in the decisions that are made about their lives, and are inspired to realise their potential, and critically, that they feel safe. Acronym for that is VIPS. The objective of the procurement exercise is to secure a partner to support the delivery of exemplary youth services for young people at our flagship Stratford Youth Zone in Theatre Square. Through this collaboration, the Council's Youth Empowerment Service will be able to progress its ambitious plans to offer a range of enriching and empowering opportunities for young people through an exciting curriculum anchored in culture, creativity and arts. I will now pass over to Geetha.
Procurement of a provider for services is required to operate the specialist elements of the youth zone. In March 2020, Cabinet formally approved the expansion of the youth zones and the youth services in the borough, which included the flagship Stratford Youth Zone. The primary use of this building is offering enrichment opportunities for young people, and this will be delivered by the Youth Empowerment Service and a provider through a procurement process. The Council is seeking this provider who will hold operating responsibilities, which includes front of house, technical teams with responsibilities for specialist and technical maintenance, as well as delivering creative programmes with the Youth Empowerment Service. The procurement process will provide an opportunity for the Council to engage in the cultural market and bring their specialist knowledge of operating cultural facilities, developing cultural and creative programmes, and leveraging external funding. The ability to source external funding will support the service provider and the Youth Empowerment Service to animate the building and widen the cultural and creative opportunities for our young people. The length of the contract is normal for these types of specialist services, as it enables that leveraging of external funding from funders like the Arts Council. There will be a 2-year break clause which will enable the Council to terminate within these periods. The timetable is tight and the award of contract decision anticipated to be considered by Cabinet in January of 2022. This is due to the Arts Council's funding round deadline of the end of January, and we are extremely keen that the successful operator is able to submit an application for the benefit of the Stratford Youth Zone. This report is a permission to tender. The next process will be undertaking market warming as part of the procurement process and progress to an invitation to tender, an open invitation to tender, and a procurement process to tender full services. I'll hand back to Carleen to conclude.
Thank you, Geetha. Over 1,000 young people and parents who participated in the Next Generation NUM survey told us that safe spaces and places, facilities and activities were where they could learn, feel safe and have fun, where reading was really important to them. Through our expanded youth service offer, young people are able to access safe spaces, trusted adults, and an enriching programme of social and emotional learning experiences and activities where they are nurtured, positively challenged, empowered to be confident, make informed choices and reach their potential in life. Furthermore, there are ambitious plans for Stratford Youth Zone. Working with a cultural provider, we'll be able to provide health and wellbeing sessions, support with schoolwork and careers advice, a youth empowerment curriculum anchored in creativity, culture and the performing arts. This will provide pathways into apprenticeships, skills development and employment opportunities in the creative and cultural sector, such as theatre, music production and dance. It will also be transformative and inclusive space for all young people, including those with special educational needs and disabilities. As you are aware, the Council and its members have received communication from representatives of various users of the former building. Whilst this is not pertinent to the matters in hand as to the calling related to the pre-procurement permission, we are sympathetic to the concerns raised and we will be seeking to continue to work with the impacted parties to find joint solutions for the future, including supporting them to secure space to continue to deliver the programmes, including some which have remained at the Youth Zone. I would also like to share some of the key activities at the Youth Zone as we started to exit tighter COVID restrictions in April up to July. There have been 408 hours of youth work with young people. Stratford has had over 100 unique users, over 85% of whom have regularly attended weekly for 12 weeks. Several young people attend the zone for 3 different sessions every week. 12% of these unique users have special educational needs and disabilities and additional support needs. Young people have attended from all over Newham, not just Stratford. The programme includes creativity for resilience and wellbeing, partnership with Head Start, beats making and disability sports. The youth work team have supported young people into employment, supported referrals to health and social care, working with Newham's multi-agency collective. Young people attending our creative for resilience and wellbeing all reported accessing regular sessions, increased their happiness and wellbeing, data captured from pre and post surveys. Parents and carers have given very positive feedback, commenting on the positive impact the Youth Zone has had on their children's lives. I hope this provides a snapshot into some of the important insights into the great work that is already underway at Stratford Youth Zone and through the partnerships can widen and grow. Chair, this evening I have with me Lynn Crank, Matt Eady and Mumtaz Begum, who are all here to answer questions of technical nature.
Okay, thank you. So is that the end of your presentation?
That's the end, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I am now opening to questions. I have submitted some questions to the executive.
Yes, Chair. Are you going to read out your questions and I will answer them, or would you like me to read them?
I have submitted them, so if you would answer those questions, please. Also, I'm mindful to give particular preference to the colleagues who have called in this, to give them a chance also to ask questions. So I recognize Councillor Alicia Chaudhry and Councillor Shaw, and Councillor Whitworth and Councillor Kendall.
Chair, do you want to take the questions first, because we don't know about your questions?
Okay, because the executive has got my questions, so can you answer the quick and short questions, just for some clarity, and then I come to you, Councillor Chaudhry.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So you asked us 6 questions. I just want to put on the outset, let's just remember what this document is here today is about. And so the questions that you have asked, Chair, quite a few of them do not pertain to the Cabinet decision before us today. And we are here to discuss the papers before us. However, I would indulge some of these questions. So you asked, who is the current anchor tenant? The council remains the landlord and is the main user of the building. And the council has not entered into a landlord-tenant relationship for this specific building. You asked, do we still have a contractual relationship with them? And if not, when did it cease? So I assume what your question is in regards to the previous tenant, and the previous tenant no longer is in the building, and that contract ceased in November of 2020, to be precise, the 20th. Do you have any contractual arrangements with any other tenant or sublets of the anchor tenant? And the answer to that is no. Can you confirm whether or not we have an interim arrangement with the Theatre Royal to provide the cultural aspects of the youth service? The answer to this, Chair, is the council is an interim arrangement with the Theatre Royal Stratford East to assist the council with the specialised provision required in the management of the site, which includes the creative and performance activities. And these aspects are included within the youth enrichment. Your 5th question is there any possibilities that the building could be co-shared or co-used with any other interested party once the procurement process has been completed? The answer, Chair, for you would be that the council is procuring a provider to deliver services. One of the roles of this procured provider would be to programme the availability of space and identify and attract other users who can deliver cultural and creative activities. So yes, they can. And your last question, Chair, was can you confirm that the building is now completely occupied and being used by the youth service? Yes, youth empowerment are occupying the building, and I have been using it since, well, came into the building in November 2020, but there were works that needed to be done through the capital programme, of which we've undertaken, and we have been delivering services to the young people since March 2021. But I just want to clarify that the interim provider will be looking to fully animate the space that's available within this building.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I would not come back at this stage with supplementary, because I recognize there's a number of other colleagues who want to ask questions. So, Councillor Chaudhry.
Thank you, Chair. If I knew I could submit my questions in advance, I would have done so. But so I would have a twofold question, which is like 10 years contact. I'm sure if I understand.
Sorry.
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. Can you hear me?
Just about.
10 years contact. Is it not a bit unusually long? And in terms of £2 million over 10 years, how will that be funded? Will the money be borrowed or cut from the Theatre Royal's budget? And what about the short-term funding cost to run the youth zone until April 22? And who is going to be funding it?
Chair, would you like me to answer each question, or do you want to take a few at a time?
Because that is a number of questions, so I think if you answer Mr. Chaudhry's question, we'll go on to another member.
Okay, so just in regards to the latter question regarding the funding and who's going to fund the building until 2022, the building as it sits at the moment is funded by the Youth Empowerment Service. It's in our budget. We have that money readily available and have that to utilise in the running of the building. In relation to the money for the building going forward, I will ask Geetha, would you be able to answer that question?
Sure. So part of the procurement process is to ensure that the provider is able to leverage the additional funding and the resources. So you will see that in the kind of paper, the 10-year arrangements is quite normal for arts providers because they need to have some, I guess, some kind of agreement and longevity to be able to prove that they can then leverage the funding from places like the Arts Council. So that's really what the 10-year funding is around, and the provider will be expected to leverage that additional money into the building, not only to provide services, but also to ensure that we fully animate that building. So it's partly funded by obviously our Youth Empowerment Service, but in that procurement process, it's to make sure that the funding that they bring in will fund the rest of the building management.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carleen, for your presentation. Agree what you said. The youth zones, it's really important. Culture, creativity, arts only will enrich young people's lives. So I agree with that. As elected members, I think we all have a responsibility to safeguard and protect children with SEND and adults with learning disabilities. With the legislations I mentioned in my presentation to protect young people with SEND and adults, how do you envisage the offer to young people with special needs will be improved in the new tender? Because I don't get that feeling that you have focused on the children with special needs and disabilities. So how will you ensure that they are safeguarded, their interests are safeguarded? And my second part to the question is, what is going to happen to the user groups who were using the Stratford Circus, like my neighbours? They're adults, but they have learning disabilities. They got nowhere to go. What consideration have you given to groups like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. So in regards to your first question regarding how we will safeguard children, young people with special education needs and disabilities, I guess my straightforward answer to you, Councillor Shaw, would be that's what we do every day in relation to the provision that we already provide throughout all of our youth empowerment services, whether that be in a building, whether that be within the community, whether that's through a detached offer. So that is something that we do. We have specialist provision for young people with special education needs and disabilities, of which we commission through various different organisations. I could name a few and have been for some time. That's something we've worked very hard to make sure that we have. We also provide inclusive provision for young people, that being a child can access any youth zone for any provision, no matter what their ability or disability may be. They are included as much as anybody else. And as you know, Councillor Shah, I am extremely passionate about this, as I have my own SEND child. We are not excluding anybody. There is no place for exclusion here. This is about making sure that young people have a quality offer, an offer that they may not receive elsewhere because of their abilities or disabilities. So I hope that answers your question. In relation to your second question, Councillor Shah.
Can we make our answers more briefer if everyone is going to get the chance to come in, please?
Just in relation to your second question, Councillor Shah, and I do appreciate the sentiments of your question, but as we sit here today, it's not pertaining to the decision that we are looking at that was a Cabinet on the 20th of July. But what I will say is we are continuing conversations with all parties and will continue conversations. We are not excluding anybody from anything, and we will make sure that we will have those conversations in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Councillor Whitworth.
Thank you, Chair. In your presentations, you explained in some detail the purpose of the new youth hub, which I would certainly applaud, and I think probably we would all agree with. But you only spent a small amount of time on the issue that concerns us most, but that what will happen to the current users. Now, you have answered part of that, and indeed part of my question was asked by Councillor Shower. And I'm not sure, and it has been, the scope of this meeting has been raised, whether it's relevant to this meeting. But I think what is interesting is with the new with the procurement process, will the new provider have to make provision to accommodate existing users? Now, that is a thing that particularly interests me, and if you can answer that, I will be pleased. But I will ask, you have said that you've been engaging with the current users. From the information we seem to get from them is that you haven't been. So can you say what have been the nature of your conversations with them, and what have you offered them so far?
Thank you, Councillor Whitworth. So just in relation to the questions you've asked, and I need to draw you back to why it is we're here today. The question is not and doesn't pertain to the Cabinet decision that's before you today. And what I would say is that in relation to the questions that are being asked, which are rightly so, I'm not disagreeing with them, they should have been asked at Cabinet after the Cabinet paper that came in March 2020. That was the space for them. So in all honesty, the conversations in relation to, the questions asked in relation to what we're discussing today is not pertinent to this paper. So.
Can you answer the question about the conversations you're having with the current users?
So in relation to you asked a question in regards to the provider being able to make provision. The provider will have the ability to animate the space with whoever wants to be inside the building. So we're not involved in that conversation as much as the youth. The Stratford Youth Zone is a space tailored to young people 0 to 25. So as long as the providers are able to meet the criteria that is set by the management provider, so that third-party provider organisation can meet the criteria set out by the management provider, and just to use the name at the moment, so that would be there to roll Stratford East as it currently stands, because they're the interim provider. There is nothing that stops any person, any organisation, any faith organisation coming to the building and asking to use that space. I'll ask Geetha to maybe respond if...
I think you've answered that question adequately. We need to move on because there's other people. Councillor Wilson, is that the old and or a new one?
That's a new one, Chair.
Okay, I will come back to you after Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again for your joint presentation. It's very interesting. Can I just take you back to the Pioneer, the Theatre Royal, that's obviously the name of the company. And obviously they've got some short-term arrangement documents for April 2022. But what are they actually receiving for giving that? And I value that as well. I think it's very important that you've managed to secure that. But what is the financial arrangement that the Theatre Royal are going to get for doing that excellent work that they no doubt will do for that period?
Sorry, Councillor Clark, can you just repeat the end part of your question because I didn't hear?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out or ask what financial rewards are they getting for doing that great work that no doubt they will do in terms of sort of keep working in the youth zone. So there must be some recompense for them to offer those services for that length of time.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Geetha, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, sure. So it's just short of 200k for the year period, as is within the kind of interim arrangements, and the interim arrangements are very much about the Theatre Royal Stratford East being able to support the infrastructure. So, you know, we've obviously got a youth empowerment service that are fundamentally running the youth offer, but we need to make sure that we are able to develop the infrastructure around the creative and cultural programme. So that's what the concession contract is in relation to. And, you know, I guess the follow-on bit of all of that is really that they are an organisation that we are working with for only this short period of time. The open and transparent procurement process is very much about making sure that we are able to go out to the market and understand what is possible and what's best for that building, what's best for the young people.
Thank you.
Just a supplementary.
Okay.
I said that, you know, that's absolutely wonderful that's sort of taking place. But is that above the current donation we give or a deal that we have with the Theatre Royal, which is for £250,000 a year, which I understand in the last budget was in that budget for this year? So is that 200 on top of the 250,000 that we agreed in the last budget?
So they're very different things, Councillor. What the 250 is a grant that is has been given to Theatre Royal for very different purposes.
Yeah.
This is very specifically about the youth zone, the Stratford building, and animating and developing that specific element. So they are two separate things.
Okay, that's excellent.
Okay, we must move on now. Councillor Wilson, and can I remind colleagues, we have 4 minutes left for this session. Councillor Wilson, then Masters. Councillor Wilson, we have 4 minutes left, so can you make yours quickly?
When you say 4 minutes, Chair, the meeting ends at 7 o'clock. I'm not clear what you mean by this.
Oh, 4 minutes for this session that we're in. We have to then deliberate after.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, I won't take all of that time till 7 o'clock to ask a question. But the briefing note, thank you very much, that was sent around. I've just been perusing it. Says a project board was established. My question is about, because it is a process issue that I think we're looking at, Chair, here in terms of procurement. That is what is in the call-in or potential call-in, you know, while we're here. So this project board has been established. Officers are working to develop and finalise tender information in preparation for commencement open procurement process, any organisation, etc. The specification is designed to attract a specialist cultural provider operator, long-term partner, with required expertise to effectively manage and operate complex and specialist performance elements. So what I wanted to tease out, because I think this is germane to the whole procurement process, is when was this project board established, and is it taking account the very good feedback that we've already heard about from the youth survey that covered 1,000 young people? So when was it established? What are the complex and specialist performance elements, and how far does it reflect what the young people themselves said in their survey?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just in relation to time, Chair, would you like to get the next question and we'll answer them together?
Okay, and Councillor Masters.
Hi, I've got a question about the users of the youth zone. I'm just interested in knowing whether, you know, it's something where people can walk in off the street, or whether we deliberately target people who face particular challenges. We've talked about people with special educational needs, but I'm just wondering whether it's a service that is targeted to people who have other challenges, say, you know, they've been excluded or other things. And also, if it is targeted, whether part of the procurement is that the people who are going to be running Stratford Circus will be in charge of doing that targeting. And if so, do we have specific outcomes in mind that you can share with us today?
Thank you, Councillor.
So, okay, so can you try to do all of that in no more than 3 minutes? And I think that's the end, because we would have run out of time. Okay, I will see if I can indulge after this.
So to make my answers brief, in relation to your question, Councillor Wilson, yes, we will take all relevant feedback to share in the service specification that we have received and that we are working through. And in regards to your question, Councillor Masters, you spoke about targeted youth work. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I hear right? Yeah. So the Youth Empowerment Service will lead the youth work, including targeted youth work, to all young people, no matter what they find themselves in, whether that be exclusion, whether that be special education needs and disabilities, whatever the issues are. Our young people, no matter who they are able to access a targeted service regardless.
Thank you. And we have less than a minute left, but I'm going to indulge Councillor Clark.
I was going to indulge
please, can we make it very quick?
It will be good, but it's a very important question. It's basically, basically the tender for the Stratford Youth Zone. From what you've heard tonight, would it be weighted to recognise the disadvantages of people with learning disabilities and special additional needs? Can we have some sort of assurance that it will be weighted to be able to achieve that?
Would you like to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's weighted towards young people because
I understand that.
And we have got an all-borough special education needs and disabilities offer that is delivered through all of our youth zones. So it will absolutely include those young people. In terms of the scoring and the weighting and the specification, I mean, that is something that we will take feedback from the question Councillor Wilson asked, and we will make sure that through our procurement process that we are not excluding any particular group, but it has to function in our kind of primary aim, which is about a youth zone, and it is absolutely inclusive of all young people, whether that's special education, disabilities, or any other young people.
Is it possible in this process, and I understand the sort of the delicacy of tender, at some stage to come back to us and let us know what shape the tender is taking? We're obviously not too interested in the finance, because that's something that would be very confidential, but it'd be good to see what advances have been made after you've been listening to people's contributions here today about the importance of weighting that within the tender itself, about young people, the disadvantages and the learning issues. It would be really good to see that at some stage to satisfy. I know many of us who obviously, like other people in this room, know people, have people in our family that have those characteristics. I think you can give me a moment sometimes, rather than interrupting me, with the characteristics that we've been talking about here tonight. I'd be very grateful if we were able to do that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So just in relation to your question, the tender will be sent to market ideally around about August. And the specification, as you may be aware, will be public when it's published. But in regards to the service provider, we will require the service provider to be committed to an equitable offer.
I've heard all that word as well.
But obviously we do want to just to make sure that you're aware, the primary deliverer at that specific building as it now is, which is Stratford Youth Zone, is the Youth Empowerment Service. We are the primary users. And so therefore, whatever we do will be to meet the needs of all young people, no matter what their ability.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's not forget the questions that you guys have been asking in relation to, is there any place? Is there any provision? What I want to just get clear today, that we are not saying no to anything. There will be a management provider where all organisations will be able to get in touch with to be able to animate the space that's there.
Thank you.
And hopefully you can come back at some stage and report to us before it goes into the public domain. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now bring this session to a close. And the next stage now is for us to have a discussion, stroke a debate on what we have heard so far before moving to the vote on whether we should refer this or whether we should bring an end to this calling process. Okay, so it's now open for discussion, both online and members present. Who is going to start?
Chair, do we stay or do you need us to leave?
It's going to be online anyway. So if you want to stay, because if you go, I'm sure you're going to go into YouTube and watch it. So, so you can stay. It's up to members, but I'm in the hands of members. Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Councillor Clark.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, can I just say, obviously, we have asked a number of questions today, and we have received some very good responses to most of the questions. And obviously, as I've said at the beginning, I'm sure none of us in this room is against having youth zones. We've had youth zones for some years, and they've always been very successful. And this is putting it into a new dimension, and also probably in the middle of one of the most difficult parts of the borough, if I may say, with youth and gangs, etc. So I think that's been very good. It's good to tease out these issues, because I think up to now it's been somewhat lacking. I did listen to that cabinet meeting. I don't think there was much discussion, if any at all. And I think this is healthy, that we're having a proper discussion and asking questions, quite rightly, about what's happened to the current users. Where are they going, as has been asked as well. And also, I really want to continue to emphasise how important it is, I'm sure, to a number of us, that we do look and weight accordingly people with those characteristics that we've spoken about today. I think that's very, very important, that we look after some of the people that are obviously more vulnerable than anybody else in our community. So I've welcomed the meeting. I welcome what you've been saying today. And let's hope it does end up being a great success. And I think also one of the things that we seem to be missing a little bit in this whole process is the consultation, bringing people forward, talking to different people. I know you've spoken to a number of people, but I know I've had people in the trade union movement coming to me saying that they won't talk to us, they won't talk to us. I don't think that's a good message that we should be sending out. We should be talking to everybody and explaining some of the exciting things that we want to do, how we're going to deal with them, and how we're going to deal with these problems that we've been raising here today. So I thank you for coming along. I'm trying to end the meeting, by the way. I just want to get my word in because he cut me off in a minute. So I'm really grateful that you've come along today and tried to explain to us as best you can the current situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for recognising that we're on a tight time scale. I'm sorry I wouldn't have cut you off. Is there any other member? Arvinder.
Chair, yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. A lot has been said, and I understand the importance of what we're trying to do here today. And as Carleen, who's always been a champion for the special needs children and the people within the community, I'm grateful for her because obviously at other places she's championed this as well. It's not just here. And by us listening to what she and her team has come along with, I'm sure we can say that, yes, it's a decision to do with the tender process, but the information that has been spoken about today, if it can be taken on board and be listened to with an open mind, I think would be something really grateful. That we are moving towards working together for a zone which is going to be for not necessarily in a sense that a specialist thing, but more importantly, that we're catering for everybody that's there, catering for the needs of our community. And I would say I would welcome this, that by us having this opportunity to do this and to have some say in the tender process. And as you said rightly, Carleen, it's an open tender that will come out. So if we are given the opportunity to maybe comment on it at some time, if we think there's just something lacking, I think that would be really grateful.
Thank you, Vinda.
If I can just say that Sam, I would like to say thank you to the lead officer and cabinet member, but I would, it's really interesting and positive to hear that we are not excluding anyone, but still it's important to make sure that we do appreciate and understand the special needs and people, we treat everyone equally, but then again, we have to make sure that treating equally does not mean that service should be equal for everyone due to the special needs and ability and etc. But I am confident that the expertise we have in this room, you will be able to make sure that this is considered. But in terms of 10 years tender, I am still not sure if it is something positive. If it was shorter, like 5 years or something, would been better or not. But I'll leave it to that. But thank you again.
Councillor Whitworth?
Yeah, I think it has been very useful, this meeting, and we've been given some clarifications and explanations that we weren't sure of, and I think the project is a very good one. I'm still unsure about some of the dealings with the current users, but we have brought that up, and I think, I'm quite happy with this tender process to be launched, as long as, and this was an important point actually that Ken brought up, that the terms of the agreement with the designated provider be brought back to us. This, I think, is of crucial importance, and in that respect, I am happy for this for the tender process to be launched.
Right. I haven't seen Councillor Wilson, then I would recognise myself after that. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, that is a fresh hand. We do have, and we've recently exercised our rights under this constitutional procedure, Councillor McCormack, for a pre-decision process. So, if it were to be the case that we were minded to say on this occasion that we go ahead with the original cabinet decision that's under the microscope, as it were, with a proviso. I don't know, I'm looking to the legal advice to this committee, or to at least you and Adrian or whoever, that we do then bring it back, not in terms of the procurement process, because that would be an undue influence, but in terms of procurement before it goes out further. Now, I realise there's a timescale issue, and by the way, I am actually, because of my own experience, I would concur with the 10-year contract thing, because I think it's, the particularly Arts Council and others, they are very rigorous and they need to show sustainability, and there's a lot of under expressions of interest forms. So I get that, but I just wondered if it was possible to have, a whatever it's called, process in terms of the terms of that procurement, bearing in mind my point that you've got a project board, and that's very good. Carleen and Geeta both reassured me, I think, that project board would take on board the scoping and the weighting, but it would still be quite useful for us to have another look at this at the appropriate stages in the timetable. Does that make sense where I'm coming from?
Thanks, Neil. Right. As chair, it's incumbent upon me to remind colleagues that we are here to consider the recommendation, and the key bit of the recommendation, the key aspect of the recommendation, it says to agree to the commencement of the tender process. So that is what it's asking, that is what the report asks Cabinet to do, to agree the commencement of the tender process. Now, Cabinet has agreed that, and this is now with us in the calling process. Now, and I hear what colleagues are saying, and I think Councillor Nazir actually have hit the hammer and the nail on the head when she says the horse is already bolted. So one aspect of the horse is already bolted, when we talked about the unions and the consultations and so on. That is before, that was around March, I think, and Geeta told us March 2020. That is when we should have spotted that, and we should have called it in, and we should have said, what about these users? What are you going to do with them, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as Councillor Nazira said, the other horse hasn't arrived yet. So it hasn't arrived to the starting position yet, let alone to be bolted. And there's where we can, I suppose, have some kind of influence along the line that Councillor Wilson was talking about, because we have what we call the pre-decision scrutiny, and it's within our prerogative as scrutiny to ask to be engaged in the pre-decision scrutiny. Or if that is not forthcoming, we can exercise our prerogative to call in, as we have done in this instance, to call in the decision once it's been made and ask the executive. But then call in is after once it's already been voted. So it's better to engage in pre-decision scrutiny and to have the discussion. And I'm sure, and I'm looking at the executives now, I'm sure the executive would want to accommodate or should accommodate scrutiny in some form of pre-decision. I know the process has to go out and it has to do the technical spec and all these things. And that is not, as Councillor Wilson said, that is not our involvement. We don't get involved in the technical side of it. As Councillor Clark is saying, it's the communication bit. Who are we consulting? Who are we including in this? And Councillor Lee Parkway says the provider of the service, whoever that provider happens to be, would be look at space, how we can how they can make space available, supposedly for the other groups that you were talking about, the other disability, other groups that might be there. But I am going to end by saying this is to agree the commencement of the tender process. So the process is now starting. The technical spec has to be written up for the tender to go out, inviting tender and everything that goes along with that. So I would end there. I see that you're trying to come in, but this bit is for members' discussion. So remember, you weren't supposed to be here. So if even you are here, I have to pretend that you're not here, Councillor Lee Parkway.
Can I not answer any of those things?
I have to treat it as you're not here, because that should have been done in your 10 minutes and the 20 minutes that you've had. Okay.
Just so, Chair, can I come in again? Sorry.
Yes, you may.
I'm looking at paragraph 4.6 of the indicative procurement timetable. It seems very tight in that the cabinet meeting permission to tender was only agreed on the 20th of July. Notice published, then the intention documents published on the 12th of the 8th. The deadline for returned tenders is on the 20th of September. So we may have to come back fairly soon. Let's just flagging that up. And I know that puts people under pressure, but I think in view of the very wide range of issues that's been raised, I think that that's still manageable, in my opinion. I think there's always a reason for us not to meet, but I'd rather we did use this decision process a bit more than we have done in the past. And it was certainly useful, I think, in another context the other week. I don't know if you agree, John.
Yep. Thank you. Any other colleague? Councillor Clark and then Avinda.
Yeah. I think we've had a commitment from the cabinet member and officer that they are willing to come back during the process of the procurement to come back and report back to us. Basically, how's it going, and have we been successful in the waiting that we'll be talking about in terms of people with those disabilities that we've flagged up tonight, characteristics. And I'm sure you were nodding earlier on about that. And to me, I think that's a really good commitment. And it's about good communications with members as well. But also, I take on board Neil's suggestion about pre-decision scrutiny. As you know, I've always been a great advocate for pre-decision scrutiny, but maybe we can link the two together. But it doesn't have to be so, formal, that we get people back and listen to what's now to be happening at procurement. And that most of us are satisfied that what we've been talking about tonight, those needs have been met as best they could be.
Thank you. So if there's no other colleagues online or present in the room who want to make a contribution, I think we have heard enough for us to form an opinion and move to the vote. So I will now give some direction. So, as I said, we now need to decide on our course of action. Those online do not have a vote, but as I said before, a presence would be recorded. We have 6 members present here that has a vote. Councillor Chaudhry has a vote, Councillor Shaw has a vote, Councillor Masters has a vote, Councillor Clark has a vote, and myself, and Councillor Whitworth has a vote. Okay, so those are the voting members.
Just before you put it to the vote, Chair, can I just say it is with that proviso that we just discussed? Yeah, so that's recorded. That it's with that proviso.
Okay, and Adrian has yes, and I know Clive is in the background, although we cannot see him, he's in the background scribing away.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you. So now I will ask the committee to either agree that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, having considered the evidence and discussion here tonight, agree not to refer the matter back to the Cabinet, or that the matter be referred to the Cabinet, and if so, highlighting the issues Overview and Scrutiny Committee wishes the Cabinet to reflect upon, and those will be considered at the meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. However, if we agree not to refer the matter back to Cabinet, that meeting that is scheduled for 1 o'clock tomorrow will fall, because there's no need for that meeting to take place. Is that understood by everyone? So we can vote.
As long as it's with the proviso, like I said.
Yes, so I hear. So I'm going to make some clarification there. So we can vote not to refer the matter back to Cabinet, and if we do so, the decision will take immediate effect, so the Cabinet decision stands. If we decide to refer it back to Cabinet, we would then have to come up with some recommendations, and there will be a Cabinet meeting tomorrow to give the executive time to respond. What Councillor Clark has just been whispering to me, provided the assurances that we have been given by the executive, Councillor Lee Parkway and Geeta, that they are willing to listen, they're willing to engage in some pre-decision scrutinies, etc. In this process. Members, the consensus is that, and I can gauge on the consensus, if that is to happen, members would be willing, but we know when we take the vote. I can bring you in at this stage, although you're not here, but yes. And just for a short while, not to make any major statement, just one sentence.
I get what I just want to say, Chair. Thank you for what you're saying. In regards to all that has been spoken about today, we will look to include in the specification document that's written up the things that we've heard this evening. But due to time, there really isn't going to be any time for pre-decision scrutiny for this paper, because it needs to be out by now.
Yeah. Provided you include that and you send it to Overview what you've included.
Yeah, sorry, can I just ask maybe the legal advisor, Mumtaz, to maybe come in at this point, just so that when whatever decision is made this evening, it's that can be adhered to.
So the recommendations before Overview and Scrutiny members is either to say there's no further action or make recommendations to Cabinet as to the decision. What we can't do is to suggest on a no further action that there's a recommendation attached.
So you're saying, can you just explain that to the committee again, please?
So on the first proposal is no further action,
yes,
and the decision goes forward. If committee is minded to say, well, we want to attach a condition to that, then it's a second recommendation that you must go with, and that will include a recommendation to ask for the cabinet members to reflect on allowing scrutiny to look at the specification. It must be, we are minded that the timescales are short in order to arrange a procurement exercise. It's not typical for members to comment on specifications. It's quite normal for officers to lead those matters, and officers have taken into consideration all those bits of feedback that this committee has provided today.
Thank you. Colleagues, we've got the assurance from the cabinet member that she is going to include in the spec our concerns. And so with that, I'm going to ask for us to go to the vote. Those in favor of not referring the matter back to the executive, please raise your hand.
Vote, Chair.
So those in favor of not referring the matter back to the executive, so it's not referring it back to the executive, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Those in favor of referring back to the executive, please raise your hands. Okay. Those in favor, so those wishing to abstain, please raise your hands. Okay, so it's carried. 2 of not referring back to the executive. No, so no member wishing to refer it back, and 4 abstentions. Is that noted? Okay. So colleagues, this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee voted in favor of not referring back to the executive. Therefore, the decision of the cabinet stands. Agenda item 5, the next meeting of Overview and Scrutiny Committee is scheduled for the 23rd of September of this year. I must thank everyone for attending the meeting. This concludes the business of the Overview and